Now comes a step of scoring your risk elements from your risk register. Now this is similar to the work we did earlier on when we were scoring the risk categories. So the process is similar. Again, risk is best understood in light of your strategy. So to rate the impact, we'll be listing the strategic objectives that you developed from the strategy model down the left side of the sheet. And across the top, we'll be listing the risk elements from your risk register that you developed in the previous step. Then what we'll be doing is considering how each risk element impacts our strategic objectives. And again, we'll be using that scale from 1 to 5 that you just established in the previous step. So in this example, we're using the traditional COSO standard definitions and have come up with these scores, but you'll be using the framework that you've established. So understand that this is just a framework, and each organization has to come up with better definitions. And as we showed in the last section, you may even want to give quantitative examples of instances where something would be a 1 risk, 2, 3, 4, or 5, so people can relate other events to those known ones. As we mentioned before, you need to be careful about the risk perception of your team. Our experience tells us there's a number of things that will tend to skew what the score is based on people's perceptions. One is the recency or availability bias. We obviously tend to overestimate things that have happened more recently and are in top-of-mind memory. We tend to underrate things where we believe that we have control over them, and therefore feel the risk is less because of that control. We also find that groupthink goes on, or confirmation bias, where we tend to come into a thought process, and once we commit to it, it's hard for us to change our mind based on other data. In other words, we keep searching for data that confirms our initial suspicion. A variation of that is groupthink itself, which is where we tend to resist change or choose to support coherence of the team, and therefore we end up in team think mode. And finally, there's a feeling of dread. If there's something that you dread, say having a needle, anything associated with that has an increased perceived risk, and it skews your perception. So again, as you facilitate the team, you need to work against these. In fact, it's our experience that usually you need to score 2 or 3 risks before the team normalizes itself on what's a 1, 3, or 5, and you may need to go back and rescore the first based on that gradual acceptance of those levels. When you're done, you'll end up with a sheet like this where you have the strategic objectives on the left and whatever risk register elements you've chosen to score across the page. So let's introduce you to the spreadsheet that you'll be using for the rest of this risk scorecard activity. Now, you need to be running Excel 2010 for the true functionality of this sheet to work out. There's conditional formatting and other things that don't exist in even 2007. The spreadsheet supports all elements of the CMA Rapid Scorecard modules. So that includes the strategy model work that you may have already completed and other things that are going to come up again later in the risk scorecard, things like the process and project analysis. For the risk scorecard, we're only using the last 4 tabs. So if you're to open up the spreadsheet, the last 4 tabs are about risk list, risk input, risk charts, and risk scorecard. So step 1 is from the work you already did in the strategy model. This may exist. If not, you're going to need to go to the strategic objectives tab, which will be on the far left. And within that, you're going to key in your strategic objective names. And then finally, you can enter in this year's priorities, the high, medium, low that you and the team agreed to. So that's step 1, entering your strategic objectives. Step 2, we now need to enter in the risk elements. So in this case, you're going to go to the tab that's called Risk List. And you're going to be inputting the work you completed in the first step of creating your risk registry. And those are just going to get listed in whatever sequence you would like in column B. Finally, you're ready to begin actually scoring the risk elements. And to do that, you're going to go to the Risk Input tab. And in there, you're going to work with your team and answer the question about what is the impact of this risk element on the success of this strategic objective. And again, you can be scoring that from 1 to 5 based on the scale and the terminology that you've agreed to. And you'll go through each one, choosing what that weighting looks like. And eventually you'll end up with this sheet, again, with your strategic objectives down the left, and across the top, the risk elements. In the next step, we'll come back and complete the likelihood tab cells, but for now, we should have these cells completed where you feel risk is impacting.